So I want to start with talking about what my colleague just mentioned, and that is that we all bring values to the People's House. One of the values that I bring is to ask this question before I make any policy decision, and that is, will this policy move us closer to the ideal of equity, or will this policy remove barriers to equity? And if it does one of those two things, then we're in the right track. I want to commend, and with your permission, Madam Speaker, I'm going to use a member's name, Assemblymember Crespo. Your presentation you just gave is the essence of moving us closer to equity. And I remember when I first met you that we had some discussions about my community, the LGBTQ community. And I saw you grow and start from a point of dignity of all human beings. And you have brought that to this chambers, the People's Chambers. And I want all of those listening to applaud you in the event that this is the last time you get to speak on the floor for your efforts in moving us closer to the ideal of equity for all people. So thank you, Assemblymember Crespo. It turns me now to one of my colleagues brought up the prevailing wage, and that's what I want to talk about. But I want to talk specifically first about one aspect of it, and it is the provisions we put in prevailing wage to encourage diversity within the construction trade. Under current law, there is not a requirement for MWBE in private contracts. This bill will require that. But it does much more than just requiring that. And I'm going to talk about MWBE, but it also includes disabled veterans as well. But let's talk about MWBE. It requires the fiscal officer, the commissioner of the Department of Labor, to develop training and to use funding to help MWBEs understand the mechanisms and procedures of prevailing wage. That's a good step forward. It also requires an annual report on the utilization in these projects by MWBEs. It requires an analysis of their anti-discrimination and EEOC policies. It requires also data about not only the MWBEs, but also the number of workers who are people of color or women or other minorities. This is a good step forward. It also requires that the MWBEs can have input in any changes of the procedures under these projects. So we have work to do, because remember I said I start each policy with whether it'll move us closer to equity or remove barriers. These steps will move us closer to equity, but what it doesn't do is remove barriers to MWBE's participation in these larger projects. So we have to work on doing that, and I have indicated to my colleague that I'm willing to work with her and others to make that happen. So this is a good step, but we have work to do. Let me talk about the bill. The bill itself is also a good step because it moves us closer to the requirement in the Constitution that in Article 1, Section 17, that says workers are not a commodity. And on public works projects, we must pay them prevailing wage. So we move closer to that. It also moves us closer. One of my colleagues mentioned taxpayer dollars of the businesses. Well, guess what? These workers also pay taxes. We all pay taxes, and taxes are to be used for the benefit of the whole state. And this is when taxpayer dollars are being used, we're working for the benefit of the workers. This is good for workers because they get increased pay. It's good for our communities because they use that pay to then spend money for small businesses and others, whether it's movies, whether it's my coffee house, whatever it is, they go out and spend that money. It's good for the local economy because sales tax dollars are going into the local government as well. It's good for the state because income taxes are going here, and it's good because they can buy homes and then we get real property taxes as well. It's a win-win for the workers. It's a win-win for the economy. It's a win-win for local and state government. It's also a stimulus. As I mentioned during the debate, every single president in a recession has said, we need people to go out and spend in the economy. What did the federal government just do? $1,200 to every person in New York State, and if you have a child, $500 for the child. That's putting money in the pockets of people so they can go and spend, but it also helps them in this difficult time. That's what this bill will do. It will put money in the pockets of workers so they can spend that money in our economies and on their families. Some folks mentioned the cost of the project. We have many studies that show the cost of the project is not substantially going to go up. Now, granted, if you compare, like many want to do, the non-prevailing wage rate and the prevailing wage rate, it's higher. So there will be more cost there, but the overall cost of the project is not higher, and most peer-reviewed studies indicate that. Indeed, 82% of all peer-reviewed studies show there is not a substantial increase in the project when it's prevailing wage. And why is that? It's because when it's prevailing wage, contractors find savings in materials. They find savings because there's increased labor productivity. They find savings because it's higher quality workers. They find savings because there's fewer change orders. They find savings because the workers are trained in safety. They're more safe. They don't have accidents. Therefore, the insurance coverage is lower. For all these reasons, prevailing wage on projects that are funded and subsidized by your taxpayer dollars is the right policy to do. And when we've added the MWBE, again, admittedly, it's a start, that makes it positive too, because we need more minorities and women in the construction trades. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, you switched on me. This is a good bill. I encourage people to support it. I know it's mixed in with other policy issues, but I am pleased, and I want to thank, as I end, I want to thank the Speaker for being with us on this. I've been working on this issue before I was an Assembly member. I've been working on this issue since 2004. 16 years. And we've got it over the finish line. And that's because of the Speaker, it's because of cooperation from the Senate, and it's because the governor partnered with us to make it happen. This is a good day for New Yorkers, and I'm pleased to have been a part of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.